So as a musician, where do you draw the line between your art and someone else's personal life? When is it okay to profit from somebody's most intimate secrets? Back in the early 80s, today's breakout artist went through a bitter divorce, giving him enough hot take material to fill the better part of 2 records. The whole experience was completely devastating to both parties. And though we're not taking sides here, we are going to give you an in-depth look at this heart-wrenching musical journey, highlighting an 80s hit that works as this songwriter's final word on the whole damn thing. Emotionally intense and strangely cathartic, I think most of us can relate to this. What do you think? Did this artist go too far with this, or did he have the right to broadcast his divorce over the radio? Let's find out next on Professor of Rock. Hey music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you remember shopping for school supplies, I'm talking number 2 pencils, Trapper Keepers, folders, around this time of year back in the school days, you're going to dig this channel of pure musical nostalgia. Make sure that you subscribe below right now. Click the big red button, click the bell so you know when our stuff's coming out. I know you'll like something on this channel. We also have a Patreon. You're going to want to check that out. We have additional content there. That helps us keep this going as a self-funded channel, and so any little bit helps. And we also have our merch below. So if you haven't guessed it yet, today we're covering one of the most successful artists of the 80s, one of my personal favorites, Mr. Phil Collins. Past episodes, we've gotten into Phil's career both with Genesis and as a solo artist. Cover tracks like In the Air Tonight, Take Me Home, and Against All Odds, Take a Look at Me Now, parentheses song. But today we're going solo Phil another time, rewinding back to the early days of his pop success to take a closer look at one of his angriest songs of the decade. Song that I'd maybe even call a hidden gem in some respects. Well, it's been streamed since then more than some of his biggest hits. I think you'll get it. Today we're going to give it its due though. It's from Phil's second solo album, Hello I Must Be Going. It's I Don't Care Anymore. Okay, so to really understand this one, we're going to have to step back into the 70s to Phil's double marriage to his first wife and to his band. So Phil met the girl of his dreams, later his nightmares, when they were just 11 years old in a London drama class. Her name was Andrea Bertorelli, or Andy for short. He refers to her as this in his autobiography. The 2 youngsters had an on-again, off-again relationship through their teen years until the late 60s, when they would, for a time, live their own separate lives. Sorry, I had to go there. However, the couple became reacquainted a few years later. This is about 1974. This is when Genesis performed in Vancouver, British Columbia, where Andy's family had moved at that time. In their time apart, Andy had given birth to a girl named Jolie. And upon seeing Andy again, Phil fell madly in love with her, and the 2 were married at the young age of 24. Phil legally adopted Jolie, and the couple also had a son named Simon. Now, while all this was happening, Genesis was also making some big-time life changes as well. Iconic frontman Peter Gabriel took his leave from the band on his way to releasing his first solo album. This happened in 1977. Climbing up on Salisbury Hill. After auditioning other singers to take Peter's place, the band ultimately agreed that Phil was their guy. Taking on both the role of drummer and the lead singer, Phil Collins readily admitted that in Genesis, there is no such thing as time off, at least then. The band worked evenings, weekends, and as he put it, any or all of the Sabbaths. And then after that, they worked some more. This was just the way it was back then. They were trying to make their way in the business. Problem was, Phil Collins' breakneck workaholic pace took a heavy toll on his marriage, and Andy came to resent him for this. Repeatedly confronted with the choice between family and career consistently won out. Now, this all came to a head in the late 70s. Phil and his bandmates, Tony Banks and Mike Rutherford, they were determined to break into the mainstream U.S. market, make it big in the U.S. Unfortunately for Andy and the kids, that meant Phil would be away from the family for the better part of a year or more as the band toured across America. When Phil told Andy his plans, she said something to the effect of, well, if you do that, we're not going to be together this time next year. That's how he said. So, Phil gambled he could work it all out somehow and chose to go anyway. Now, not surprisingly, in his absence, Andrea sought the affections of another man, which became a full-blown affair. Phil got the news from Andy while he was out on tour. Now, wanting to save his marriage, Phil temporarily returned home. But it was too late. Andy wanted a divorce. Now, when Phil Collins finished the tour, he came back to an empty house. Andy took the kids, and she moved back to Canada, actually. Devastating blow for Phil, who had chosen to save his marriage just a little bit too late. As fate would have it, as Phil returned to bachelorhood, Genesis went on hiatus, with Rutherford and Banks both working on solo albums. Alone in an empty house, Phil had little to occupy his attention other than the thoughts of his broken marriage. So he actually transformed his master bedroom into an ad hoc studio, and he started writing. Over the course of a year, he stockpiled a cache of songs that would work with painful precision, document his take on his failed marriage. Ultimately, Phil copied the batch of demos to a cassette, and he played them for Atlantic's Ahmet Ertegun, the legend who, after hearing them, declared, "This is a record." The majority of Phil's heart-wrenching material, that found its way onto his first solo album called Face Value, although other tracks would show up on some Genesis albums and the Against All Odds soundtrack. Incidentally, much of 1986's hit song Invisible Touch was actually written specifically about Andy. It came out in 86, though, so it was quite a bit later. She really did a number on Phil, apparently, with these songs. There's so many hits about that severed relationship. But for Face Value, Phil teamed up with co-producer Hugh Padgham, and together they crafted an album filled with so much anger, so much betrayal, just open wounds. It caught everyone off guard. Funny thing is that Phil had intended the songs to be marriage-saving messages to his ex-wife. He thought that, if he was completely open and honest with her about how he felt, she might reconsider their divorce and come on home. But the problem was that Phil's songs had the opposite effect on Andy, just drove her further away. From her perspective, Phil's music painted her as the villain. How does that saying go? You catch more flies with honey than vinegar. People say that to me sometimes. If you're trying to win back your wife, lyrics like, "If you told me you were drowning, I would not lend a hand," are really not really helping your cause. Maybe it's just me, but metaphorical murder seems like a far cry from being apologetic. But to give Phil the benefit of the doubt, perhaps he didn't mean those lines to be specifically about Andy. Even so, if you were her and you heard some of those lyrics, how would you take it? You just got to look at it both ways. Phil Collins and Andrea Bertorelli, though, officially divorced in 1980. Face Value was released shortly afterwards, February 13th, 1981. Actually, the day before Valentine's Day. Just saying. The album featured 3 Andy-inspired singles: In the Air Tonight, I Missed Again, and If Leaving Me Is Easy, just a scorcher. On the bright side for Collins, Face Value outsold every previous Genesis album. It reached number 1 in the UK and number 7 in the US. In time, it would sell over 11 million copies worldwide. Plus, In the Air Tonight became one of Phil's most iconic tracks, going to number 2 in the UK. Didn't do as well over here, but it's number 1 in our hearts if you want to check out that episode. So after bearing his soul on this essential record, Collins became one of the most unlikely stars of the 80s, prompting rumors that his new solo career meant Genesis was going to break up. However, nothing could be further from the truth, as we know. Phil and Genesis became an 80s staple, going back and forth. Reuniting once again, the trio released Abacab in September of 81, became the band's first million seller. And after a lengthy international tour, Collins got to work on his second solo album called Hello, I Must Be Going. So let me break for a second to mention today's sponsor, Magic Spoon. I love to eat, but I'm a terrible eater. When I was a kid, breakfast, it was my favorite meal. Eating a bowl of cereal in front of Saturday morning cartoons was my thing. But as I've gotten older, it's been hard to find something convenient that's still healthy and good. Then I found Magic Spoon grain-free cereal, and it was perfect for the inner boy in me. so I can fuel up on a high-protein meal that I can enjoy in the morning or anytime. In fact, it's become a daily treat. With a variety pack that comes in 4 delicious flavors, fruity, frosted, cocoa, and peanut butter, Magic Spoon is cereal reinvented. It's great for a low-carb lifestyle or if you have any issues with gluten, soy, or wheat. Plus, there are no artificial flavors in Magic Spoon grain-free cereal. Click the link below to grab a variety pack and try it today. Be sure to use the promo code Professor of Rock, all together in caps, at checkout. You'll get $5 off any order. Or just scan the QR code on screen. Or just go to magicspoon.com/Professor of Rock. It's also backed by a 100% happiness guarantee. Check it out. Okay, so the thing is, by the time Phil started working on Hello, I Must Be Going, Phil hadn't gotten his relationship with Andy out of his system yet. So in a very real sense, Hello, I Must Be Going was a spiritual sequel to Face Value, a round 2 of his marriage misery, a post-divorce sonic onslaught, if you will. Collins would say that when he started on the album, he was pretty much out of material. He'd used most of what he had written on Face Value and some of it on Abacab. However, inspiration struck in the form of his divorce's legal proceedings. I guess Phil said at the time he was getting regular letters from Andy's lawyers asking for unbelievable things. Each of them demanding a slice of his newfound fortune. It was a fortune Collins claimed didn't really exist yet. Although Face Value made some big-time sales, he said the record and publishing companies were slow to cough up any royalties. Another source of song inspiration was Andrea's move back to England with the kids, and a new boyfriend, a Canadian boyfriend, in tow. Actually, according to Phil, he actually got along with that guy better than he did Andy. Through all of this post-marital upheaval, Phil tried his best to stay even keel. But he admitted that he had a quick temper and there was a lot of shouting. It was a frustrating, enraging situation that didn't seem to have any end in sight. But you know what? It soon led to a new stockpile of no-holds-barred divorce-influenced tracks. Songs like Don't Let Him Steal Your Heart Away, I Cannot Believe It's True, Why Can't It Wait Till Morning, and I Don't Care Anymore, all of which were singles from this album. Of course, there's also the unbelievably catchy #1 UK, #10 US smash hit, You Can't Hurry Love. But really, that's a little off-brand for this record. It's, a real upbeat song. Honestly, Collins would say that the last thing he wanted to do was make a second divorce album. But he defended the project saying that he was someone who wrote from the heart, not from his head. So he had no other option, really. Hello, I Must Be Going wouldn't quite replicate the success of Face Value, mind you, but it would come pretty close. Reached #8 in the US, #2 in the UK, went on to sell 6 million copies worldwide. Not a bad showing at all, multi-platinum. I don't care what you say. So on to I Don't Care Anymore. The album, of course, kicks off with this bombastic 5-minute track. It was cut down to 4 minutes and 45 seconds for the single version. Really is an in-your-face, tell me how you really feel, hold nothing back track that I think most of us can relate to. Sometimes it's just how it is. We've all had those days where we've had our fill and we're just done. Honestly, this song also kind of serves as a mission statement for the whole record. And it makes sense that it's the lead-off track. It's so bitter, so angry, it's frustrated. And it's pointed directly at Andrea and the divorce. But it's also there to be cathartic. It's insanely cathartic, actually. Phil Collins resigning himself to the fact that things between him and Andy are really over. Whereas Face Value was supposed to be a collection of messages to, woo Andy back home. Hello, I Must Be Going. That's Collins telling her, don't bother. I wouldn't take you back anyway. It's over. He's cutting all ties. Goodbye, Andy. This is really him finalizing his divorce on a record. Taking the stand and telling the world everything. So it doesn't matter what her friends say. It doesn't matter if she drags his name all over the place. It doesn't matter the games that she plays. You're not going to catch Phil crying because you know what? Yeah, he doesn't care anymore. In certain ways, I Don't Care Anymore is comparable to In the Air Tonight. Not only this song is dark in tone, but there are some musical commonalities as well with the song. Both showcase a powerful drum kit and include simplistic synthesizers and guitar riffs. And actually, while we're talking instruments, Phil Collins actually plays every one of them, except guitar. It's Phil Collins on vocals, drums, keyboards, bass pedals, and the tambourine. Daryl Sturmer, he mans the guitar. But whereas In the Air Tonight declares, I remember, don't worry, how could I ever forget? How could I ever forget it's the first time? All Phil wants to do in I Don't Care Anymore is forget. Just forget. This song, it's his final statement about his former marriage. And after that, there's just nothing else to say. I really ain't bothered what you think of me, because all I want of you is just a let me be. And actually, to seal his testimony, Phil Collins ends the song repeating the words "no more" like 20 times, just in case you missed the first 19. No more. There's also another critical element here. A big reason Phil was finally ready to move on was the fact that he was in another relationship at this time. The girl, actually his future wife, Jill Tavelman. During this period after his falling out with Andrea, Jill helped him get through the wreckage. The couple got married in 1984, and together they had one daughter, Lily, great actress. The marriage lasted until 96. But thanks to this new lease on life, Collins was able to shift his attention away from Andrea and the pain, take his writing into some new direction. But not before he unleashed one of his grittiest vocals of the 80s. Phil Collins is truly one of the most underrated vocalists ever. Just got a monster voice, so powerful. I love it. Back then, I Don't Care Anymore kind of underperformed for an 80s Phil Collins track. It topped out at number 39 on the Billboard Hot 100. I mean, if you compare that to the rest of his hits in the decade, 7 number ones, 3 more top 10s, and 2 more top 20s, not even counting what he did with Genesis. It's pretty epic. To be fair, I cannot believe it's true. That stalled at number 79, and actually, I Don't Care, it did go to number 3 on the top rock tracks chart. So it's not like the song was bringing up the rear, but it's been huge over the last few decades. Talk about that in a second. Incidentally, I Don't Care Anymore, it also scored Phil his first Grammy nomination. It was for Best Rock Vocal Performance. However, it lost out to Michael Jackson's Beat It, like everybody else did that year. It was also used in an episode of Miami Vice. In fact, I Don't Care Anymore is one of 4 Phil Collins songs to be used on that series. Show also featured Take Me Home, In the Air Tonight, Long, Long Way to Go, and, Phil the Shill himself. To clarify, that's actually the name of a 1985 episode that he guest starred in. Not my personal assessment of the man. I love him.
I'm sorry, Stan. Well, please try it. We try to be honest.
I Don't Care Anymore was also covered by the metal supergroup Hell Yeah. That went to number 10 on the mainstream rock chart. I think it was 2016. Here's the thing, though. I Don't Care Anymore has been streamed close to 100 million times. This is over the last decade. Right there with some of his biggest hits of the 80s. Though he has 2 hits, Another Day in Paradise and In the Air Tonight, they're pretty close to 1 billion. It's another day for you and me in paradise. So by the time Phil released his 3rd solo offering, No Jacket Required classic, it seemed like he was finally able to get his previous marriage completely out of his system. I mean, if songs like Susudio, One More Night, and Don't Lose My Number are any indication, Phil had finally found better things with his time. But you know what? To be fair to Andrea, I gotta say, there's two sides to this turbulent tale. Hey, even Phil Collins knows that. We always need to hear both sides of the story.
We always need to hear both sides of the story.
As the years have passed, Andrea, she's spoken out about how she viewed these events, in her words, particularly how Phil profited off their divorce, as she says. Dismayed about her ex-husband's musical assault on their relationship, Andrea emphasized that Phil, he had a really short fuse and a preference for arguing while they were married. Also that he made his priorities pretty clear when he left for Genesis, their year-long tour. To her, he was always choosing career over family, so she just left. And as for the divorce settlement, she had 2 kids to take care of. His kids, is what she says. In Andy's words, and I quote, "When I asked him to stop talking and writing songs about our relationship, he said he had the artistic license to write about whatever he wanted." She would also say, and I quote, direct quote, "Basically, he was making too much money out of his divorce to worry about my feelings or his children's feelings." That's pretty harsh critique. A little too harsh, but then again, Phil wasn't exactly playing nice either. It's unfortunate, that it all went down the way it did. I guess the only silver lining here is the music. And that music has gotten many people through some harsh breakups. In fact, if you want to get vulnerable, share how it affected you in the comments. But when I went through my divorce 18 years ago, both of these records, Face Value and Hello, I Must Be Going, narrated perfectly by Phil's deeply expressive and heartbreaking vocal gymnastics. They helped me survive so many dark nights of the soul. The 4 a.m. tossing and turning lonely hours when you wonder if you're going to see the light of the morning. Phil got us through it, and he wrote some of the most heart-wrenching songs in the history of the popular music canon. His music pulled so many of us through the fire. His music pushed us through those horrendous stages of grief. These songs carried you from denial to anger, from bargaining to depression, finally coming out the other side to acceptance. Thank you, Phil.
No more. No more. No more.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Leave us a comment about Phil Collins and I Don't Care Anymore. What are your memories of this song, of these albums, of this time in his career? What do you think about Phil as a vocalist, as a lyricist, as a songwriter, his stuff with Genesis, or solo? Let's have a great discussion about Phil, one of my favorites ever. If you like our content, we invite you to subscribe. We would love to have you as part of our community. Just hit the red button. Also, check us out on Patreon. It's all about keeping the music alive. Till next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.